September 19th, 1944, near Arracourt, Lorraine, France. The fog is thick enough to swallow sound. The world is muted, damp, pale, and uncertain. You can't see more than 100 yards ahead. Somewhere out there, among the hedgerows and rolling farmland, are the tanks of the German 5th Panzer Army. Inside his Sherman tank, Lieutenant James M. Leach of the 37th Tank Battalion presses his ear against the intercom. Static crackles through the headset. "Can't see a damn thing," his driver mutters. The engine idles low, the hull gently vibrating. The smell of oil and exhaust fills the cramped compartment. For days, the men of Major General John Wood's 4th Armored Division, part of Patton's 3rd Army, have been fighting to hold the ground east of Nancy. The weather, once clear, has turned treacherous, dense morning fog, thick clouds, and rain that blinds the gunners' sights. Visibility has become the enemy's greatest ally. Yet somewhere in that murk, the Germans are coming. After weeks of retreat across France, Hitler has ordered a counterattack to reclaim Lorraine and cut off Patton's advance toward the Saar. Leading the charge, General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army, equipped with the formidable Panther tanks, heavier armor, deadlier guns, and longer range than anything the Americans have. Leach's radio crackles. "All units, this is Able Company. Contact front. Enemy armor advancing from Arracourt." The men straighten. The driver's knuckles whiten on the controls. Through the fog, vague shapes begin to move, hulking, shadowed forms, the silhouettes of tanks. Leach squints through his periscope. "That's not us," he breathes. He grabs the intercom. "Traverse left. Gunner, he loaded?" "Loaded. Range 200. The gunner hesitates. "200? I can't even see it." "Then shoot blind." The Sherman roars. The shell vanishes into the mist, followed by a muffled explosion. A flash of light bursts through the fog. The Panther has fired back. The earth trembles. It's the start of the Battle of Arracourt, one of the largest armored clashes on the Western Front. But in this opening act, neither side fully knows what they're fighting. For the Americans, confusion reigns. The fog turns the battlefield into a labyrinth. Radio messages crisscross. Multiple enemy tanks spotted near Juvillies. "No, near Lizzie. Wait, correction, Arracourt." Units lose contact. Platoons fight alone. But the Germans are worse off. Their maps are outdated, their reconnaissance almost non-existent. The Panthers, sleek but cumbersome, push forward without infantry support. At 7:30, the 37th Tank Battalion as headquarters receives word German armor has broken through near Lizzie. Major Creighton Abrams, commanding officer of the battalion, a tall, deliberate man known for his calm under fire, grabs his helmet and steps outside. The fog hangs low, dew collecting on his jacket. He listens. No artillery, no planes, just the low growl of tank engines somewhere unseen. "All right," Abrams says. "Let's hunt." Major Creighton Abrams climbs onto the turret of his Sherman Thunderbolt 4. His crew, veterans of Normandy and the drive across France, move quickly, efficiently. "Mount up," he orders. Within minutes, the 37th Tank Battalion begins to roll out, treads grinding through wet soil and mist. The men have learned to trust Abrams' instincts. He isn't reckless, but he moves fast, never hesitating when the situation demands it. The fog might blind the Germans, but Abrams intends to use it. As the battalion fans out across the fields south of Arracourt, they follow the narrow dirt tracks between rows of corn and apple trees. Somewhere beyond, the 111th Panzer Brigade, newly formed under Oberst Meinrad von Laukert, is advancing westward. Most of its tank crews are fresh from training schools in Germany. Many have never fought in real combat. Inside one Panther, a 19-year-old gunner named Hans Becker wipes condensation from his gun sight. "Visibility less than 100 meters, he mutters. His commander, Oberfeldwebel Kraus, frowns. "Stay alert." The Americans are near, but as they move forward, their radios crackle with confusion, conflicting reports, no precise coordinates, no aerial reconnaissance. They are advancing blind into an unseen enemy. Abrams halts his column near Lizzie. The fog muffles every sound, making distance impossible to judge. He gestures for his men to spread out. "Hold fire," he says over the radio. "Let them come." Moments later, faint engine noises rise from the mist ahead. The outline of a Panther appears, tall, angular, menacing. Abrams waits. At this range, the Panther's long 75mm gun should dominate the fight, but the fog erases its advantage. "Gunner," Abrams says quietly. "AP, 100 yards. Fire." The Sherman's 75mm cannon erupts. The shell slams into the Panther's side armor, sparks bursting through the mist. The enemy tank shudders, halts, and belches black smoke. Target knocked out, the gunner whispers. Abrams nods. Move, new position. They'll be looking for the muzzle flash. That's how the Americans fight that morning, small groups of Shermans maneuvering constantly, striking, disappearing, striking again. The M4 Sherman, lighter and faster, can't win a head-on duel with a Panther. But in the rolling fields of Lorraine, where visibility shifts by the minute, speed and coordination win battles. By 9 o'clock, the fog thickens again. Abrams' tank stops near Arracourt. The radio bursts alive. It's Captain Kenneth W. Collins from C Company. We've got a column of Panthers moving west. Looks like a full platoon. Abrams grabs his microphone. Hold position. Flank left and right. Don't engage until they pass your front. Make them chase shadows. Meanwhile, to the north, Lieutenant Leach and his platoon crawl through the hedgerows. His gunner peers through the periscope. I've got movement, big ones. Leach narrows his eyes. That's them. He waves his hand. All tanks, fire at will. 4 Shermans erupt in unison, their 75mm guns pounding into the fog. The Panthers respond instantly, their return fire ripping apart the ground. Leach's tank rocks violently as dirt and shrapnel shower down. 1 shell whistles overhead and detonates in the orchard behind them. Then, silence. The fog swallows it all again. Leach exhales. We're still alive? His loader laughs nervously. For now. Through the haze, 1 Panther burns fiercely, its crew climbing out silhouetted against the flames. Another reverses into a ditch, immobilized. Abrams' voice crackles through the net. Good shooting. Keep moving. Don't let them regroup. By midday, the 37th Tank Battalion has destroyed or disabled over a dozen Panthers, not through sheer firepower, but through deception and agility. Each engagement lasts minutes. Each ends before the Germans can react. The battlefield is chaos. German commanders, unable to see their flanks or coordinate by radio, order blind advances into American crossfire. We couldn't see who we were fighting, a captured German later said. Only that every time we moved, something exploded. As evening falls, the fog finally begins to lift. Smoke and haze drift across the fields, revealing the wrecks of more than 20 German tanks. The Americans move among them, weary, faces blackened by soot. Abrams climbs down from his Sherman, surveying the destruction. They came at us in the dark, he says quietly, and paid for it, but the battle is far from over. Overnight, Manteuffel orders new reinforcements, fresh Panthers, fresh crews to strike again at dawn. And the fog will return. September 20th, 1944. The Lorraine countryside lies under a pale shroud. The fog has returned heavier than before, a gray curtain that clings to the earth and erases every horizon. The wrecks of yesterday's battle stand as dark silhouettes, their turrets still smoking. Somewhere behind them, new engines rumble. At 0600 hours, the German 113th Panzer Brigade, supported by elements of the 11th Panzer Division, begins its counterattack toward Arracourt. Their objective: to punch through the thin American screen, seize the crossroads, and cut off the 4th Armored Division's spearhead. In the hamlet of Lezy, Lieutenant Leach's platoon lies in ambush once again. The men huddle inside their Shermans, listening to the slow, rhythmic thud of approaching tanks. They're coming back, his driver whispers. Leach tightens his jaw. Same as yesterday. Hold your fire. The Panthers appear first, their long barrels piercing through the mist like lances. But instead of charging headlong, they creep forward this time, cautious, learning from the chaos of the previous day. Behind them, Panzer Grenadiers on half-tracks follow, rifles ready. The Americans wait until the lead Panther closes within 150 yards. Leach gives a sharp order. Fire! The Sherman's gun roars. The first shot slams into the Panther's lower glacis, glancing off harmlessly. Ricochet! The gunner shouts. Hit him again! The second round strikes true, punching into the side armor and detonating inside the turret. The Panther erupts, flames spilling from the hatches. German infantry scatter, diving into ditches. Machine guns open up from both sides. The fog becomes a living thing, flashing, screaming, burning. To the south, Major Abrams maneuvers his command group along a hedgerow near Bazaine-la-Petite. His radio is alive with voices, units calling for ammunition, tank destroyers requesting target coordinates. We're fighting blind, one sergeant reports. Abrams' tone is steady. So are they. Keep moving, keep them guessing. Nearby, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, armed with Agile M18 Hellcats, joins the fray. Their crews, trained to fight hit and run, exploit the low visibility to devastating effect. A Hellcat, moving at nearly 50 miles per hour, darts across an open field, fires a single shot into a Panther's flank, then vanishes into the mist. German tank crews, frustrated and disoriented, fire at shadows. Their shells tear through barns, orchards, and smoke. One Panther turns its gun toward a burning wreck, thinking it's an enemy, and fires again, destroying a fellow tank. At 0900, a break in the fog reveals a scene of eerie devastation. Across the rolling terrain, burning tanks dot the hills like iron tombstones. Abrams' men push forward cautiously, clearing pockets of resistance. "Mark every wreck," he orders. "I want to know how many they've lost." By mid-morning, radio intercepts confirm the scale of the German losses: more than 40 tanks destroyed or abandoned in less than 48 hours. Yet reports also warn that Manteuffel is preparing a third assault, this time from the north, aimed directly at Arracourt itself. As the men refuel and rearm, a group of soldiers from the 10th Armored Infantry Battalion trudge past the wrecks. One pauses beside a burned-out Panther, its steel warped by heat. He knocks gently on the hull. "So much for the invincible tank," he murmurs. But Abrams knows better than to celebrate too soon. "They'll keep coming," he tells his men. "They think they can bleed us out. Let them try." At 1600 hours, drizzle begins to fall, cold and steady. The tanks are slick with mud. Mechanics work by touch, cleaning guns, checking treads. Inside his command tent, Abrams studies the map of Lorraine. The names blur together: Arracourt, Lezy, Juvilliers, Bears. Each has seen fire. Each may again tomorrow. He radios Division HQ. "Recommend holding current line through the night. Fog's too thick for air support. Armor stretched thin." The reply comes crackling through the static. "Copy that, Abrams. Hold if you can. Weather's grounding everything. You're on your own till morning." Abrams leans back, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. Outside, the distant thump of artillery echoes through the fog. "On our own," he mutters. Same as always. As night falls over Lorraine, the men of the 4th Armored Division settle into uneasy silence. The fog still clings to the earth, and the Panthers are still out there, somewhere in the gray, engines idling, waiting for dawn. Tomorrow, the battle for Arracourt will reach its breaking point. September 21, 1944. Before sunrise, the world is once again swallowed by fog. The fields east of Arracourt, scattered with craters, smoking wrecks, and the twisted remains of Panthers, are silent. Dew beads on the barrel of every gun. The air smells of diesel, cordite, and damp earth. Inside his command tank, Major Creighton Abrams listens to the faint buzz of the radio. Reports trickle in. Enemy movement near Bizange, armor massing south of Richecourt. The Germans are regrouping. Despite 2 days of punishing losses, General Manteuffel has ordered another attack. This one, he promises Berlin, will break the American line for good. In truth, it's desperation. The 5th Panzer Army is exhausted, its supply lines overstretched. Many of its Panther tanks sit idle, low on fuel or ammunition. Crews are tired, shaken by the fog and the unseen Shermans that seem to appear, fire, and vanish. But orders are orders, and Hitler expects victory. At 0700, the Germans strike again. From the mist east of Richecourt surge dozens of Panthers, supported by Mark IVs and self-propelled guns. Their engines thunder in unison, the ground trembling beneath them. The leading elements of the 37th Tank Battalion spot the movement first. "We've got armor, heavy, coming straight at us," a radio operator shouts. Abrams reacts instantly. "All units, form a defensive arc around Arracourt. Let them walk right into it." He knows the terrain now, every hedgerow, every ridge, every dip that can hide a tank. The Americans are outgunned but not out-hot. The fog, once a curse, has become their camouflage. At the southern flank, Captain Kenneth W. Collins and his C Company crew crouch low in the grass beside their Shermans. They can hear the German tanks before they see them. The grinding gears, the hiss of hydraulics, the clanking tracks. Collins whispers into his mic, "Wait until you see the crosses." The first Panther emerges through the fog, black cross glistening on its hull. Collins exhales. Now, his Sherman fires. The shell slams into the Panther's flank. Smoke erupts, followed by a dull explosion. The next shot comes from another Sherman, then another. Within seconds, 3 German tanks are burning. The survivors turn wildly, unable to locate the source of the ambush. "Shift position," Collins orders. His crew throws the tank into reverse, mud churning beneath the tracks. They dart behind a hedgerow, reload, and fire again. To the north, Leach's platoon is engaged in a deadly cat-and-mouse fight. "Panther, 2 o'clock!" His gunner shouts. Range 150. "Fire!" The shell slams home and the Panther's turret bursts open like a drum. Another appears behind it. this one firing first. The shot grazes the Sherman's side, tearing through the fender. Sparks and smoke fill the cabin. Hit! The loader coughs. Still mobile? Still mobile. Then move, damn it. They lurch forward, turning sharply into a gully. The wounded Sherman groans as it rolls downhill, smoke trailing from its armor. Leach's hands shake as he steadies his headset. Report damage when we're clear. By midday, the fog begins to thin, revealing a battlefield littered with burning wrecks. Abrams' men have destroyed more than 20 enemy tanks in the past 4 hours. Yet ammunition is running low, and every gun barrel glows red-hot. Abrams peers through his binoculars toward the ridgeline east of town. The outline of new Panthers appears. The 4th Grenadier Brigade, fresh reinforcements rushed from Germany, charging straight into the fray. He lowers his glasses. They never quit, he mutters. Then louder, into his mic. We'll hold the ridge. Call division, tell them I need artillery now. Minutes later, American 155mm guns open up from the rear. The shells whistle overhead, descending into the German formation. Each blast tears craters through the fields, flipping tanks like toys. Smoke columns twist skyward, merging with the thinning fog. Still, some Panthers push through. One shell smashes into Abrams' command post, showering dirt and metal. He ducks, shouting into his radio. Pull back to secondary line. Keep them in the open. The Shermans reverse, using the terrain like water, flowing, bending, disappearing. From hidden angles, they strike again, hammering the flanks of the advancing Panthers. By late afternoon, the German assault collapses. Commanders report lost contact with their battalions. Fuel trucks are burning. Survivors flee eastward under cover of smoke. Abrams climbs out of his tank. The air is acrid, hazy, alive with the crackle of burning fuel. His crew gathers around him, exhausted. Someone says quietly, "That was their best shot, sir." Abrams nods slowly. And they broke their back on it. The Battle of Arracourt is not yet over, but the outcome has shifted. The vaunted Panthers of the 5th Panzer Army have been blunted by smaller, faster, more coordinated Shermans and by the men who command them. As dusk falls, the horizon glows with fire. The fog at last begins to lift for good. September 22, 1944. The fog lifts just enough to reveal the scars of 3 days of fighting. Blackened hulls of Panthers and Shermans lie scattered across the open fields east of Arracourt. Smoke still curls from wreckage, half buried in mud. The smell of oil and burnt steel lingers in the air, mingled with the faint sweetness of crushed corn stalks. Major Creighton Abrams and the men of the 37th Tank Battalion have held the line, but barely. The American defenses are stretched thin, ammunition low, and every machine has taken a beating. Mechanics work through the night, welding armor plates and coaxing engines back to life. Inside the command post, a shattered farmhouse on the edge of Juvillies, Abrams studies the map by lantern light. Beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce C. Clark, commander of Combat Command A, leans over the table. Intel says Mentoffel's pulling armor from Dews, Clark says quietly. They're still trying to break through. Abrams exhales smoke from his cigarette. Then they haven't learned a thing. The Germans are indeed regrouping. Reports from prisoners reveal that their losses are severe, entire platoons wiped out, communications cut, units fighting without orders. But Hitler's commands are absolute. No retreat, no pause. The 5th Panzer Army is to attack again, this time with everything it has left. At dawn, reconnaissance planes from the 19th Tactical Air Command finally break through the clouds. Their pilots radio back coordinates of long German columns creeping west. Tanks, trucks, and fuel carriers moving along the narrow roads near Chateau Salins. Abrams smiles grimly. About time the weather helped us for once. By 0930 hours, the roar of engines fills the sky. P-47 Thunderbolts dive through the thinning mist, their 50 caliber guns shredding the German columns. Bombs fall among the trees, scattering dirt and debris. The Panthers below have no cover. One after another, they erupt in orange flame. From the ground, the men of the 4th Armored Division cheer. For the first time in days, the fog of Lorraine doesn't belong to the enemy. Still, on the front lines near Lezy, Lieutenant James Leach and his battered platoon brace for another ground assault. Incoming armor, his radio operator warns. Leach peers through binoculars, shapes moving in the haze again. Steady, he says. Don't waste shells till you're sure. The Germans advance cautiously now. Their confidence shattered but their discipline intact. A handful of surviving Panthers from the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades creep along the ridge, guns scanning for the elusive Shermans that have tormented them for days. Abrams watches from his own ridge 2 kilometers away. All right, he says into the mic, we've bled them enough. Now we finish this. He signals artillery. Within minutes, American guns unleash a curtain of fire. The first salvo lands dead center on the German line, scattering their formation. Then, as the smoke thickens, Abrams orders his tanks forward. The Shermans surge from behind hedgerows and ridgelines. 30, 40 of them. Engines howling, guns blazing. The Germans, shocked, scramble to turn their turrets. The Shermans weave and flank, darting between burning hulks. Leach's tank lurches to a halt on soft ground. Target 1 o'clock Panther, range 250, fire. The gun recoils, flame bursting from the muzzle. The shot punches through the Panther's lower side plate. The enemy tank bursts into fire, hatches flying open. Moments later, the sky rumbles, another flight of P-47s screaming overhead, dropping rockets into the retreating German columns. Explosions ripple across the fields. By midday, the assault collapses. German armor burns from Chateau Salins to Lezy. The survivors abandon their vehicles and flee east, leaving behind the smoldering remains of what once was a formidable panzer force. Clark radios 3rd Army headquarters. Enemy repulsed. Arracourt secure. Abrams removes his helmet, wiping grime from his face. Around him, tank crews cheer weakly, too exhausted to celebrate. That's it, someone murmurs. They're finished. Abrams looks toward the horizon, the smoke rising in thin, dark pillars, the silence spreading across the valley. No, he says quietly. They're done here. But this war's far from over. That night, rain falls again over Lorraine. It patters on the hulls of silent tanks, on helmets resting beside sleeping soldiers. For the first time in days, there is no thunder of engines, no rattle of machine guns, only the soft hum of wind moving through the broken fields. The Battle of Arracourt has been won. But its lessons and its cost are only beginning to sink in. September 23, 1944, the rain turns the battlefield into a graveyard of mud and steel. Dawn creeps across Lorraine, revealing the wreckage in full. Blackened Panthers half submerged in ditches shattered. Shermans resting nose down in shell holes, and the lifeless forms of men, American and German, lying where the fog had hidden them days before. Major Creighton Abrams walks the field in silence, hands behind his back, mud clinging to his boots. Around him, medics move methodically, marking locations for recovery. Mechanics, their faces hollow from exhaustion, pick through burned-out tanks for salvageable parts, radio sets, track links, a serviceable machine gun mount. One soldier, Private First Class Daniel Scott, kneels beside a destroyed Panther, tracing his finger across the iron cross painted on its side. Hell of a machine, he mutters. Abrams stops beside him. Yeah, he says quietly. But it takes more than steel to win a fight. In the command tent, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce C. Clark reads through casualty lists. His voice is low, grim. We've lost 15 tanks total. 27 men killed, 41 wounded. He glances at Abrams. The Germans lost over 80 tanks, maybe more. Some reports say 100. Abrams nods slowly. They threw everything they had at us, Bruce, and they broke themselves doing it. Outside, the rain continues to fall. A pair of G is from the 10th Armored Infantry Battalion drag a captured German flag through the mud. Souvenir for the guys back home, one says with a tired grin. No one stops them. Meanwhile, intelligence officers from 3rd Army arrive to assess the aftermath. They photograph the wrecks, measure impact angles, and collect fragments of Panther armor for study. The reports will later reveal that many German tanks were destroyed by flank shots, evidence of superior American maneuver and coordination. A young war correspondent approaches Abrams. Sir, how'd your men manage it? These were the newest German tanks, heavier guns, thicker armor. And you stopped them cold. Abrams looks at the man, then out across the ruined valley. They were better on paper, he says simply. But war's not paper. It's training, discipline, and nerve. Our boys kept their heads. That's why we're still standing. In the afternoon, General Manteuffel's staff finally reports the full extent of their defeat to Army Group G headquarters. The 5th Panzer Army's armored strength has been crippled, more than half its tanks destroyed, many beyond repair. Supply routes are shattered, and morale has plummeted. In Berlin, the news is met with disbelief. But for the men on both sides, the cost is counted in lives, not tonnage. At Lezy, Lieutenant James Leach and what remains of his platoon help bury the dead. They mark each site with simple wooden crosses, no fanfare, no words. Leach pauses at one mound where both American and German helmets rest side by side. Fog didn't care whose side you were on, he murmurs. Nearby, Chaplain Robert Harrington kneels in the rain, reading softly from his Bible. The words drift over the fields, fragments lost in wind and thunder. As night falls, Abrams stands once more by his tank, Thunderbolt 4, its hull pitted and scorched. He runs a hand along the steel. "You did your job," he whispers. Then to his crew, "Get some rest. We move east in the morning." "East, sir?" one asks, surprised. Abrams nods. "Patton's orders?" The line's shifting. The Germans are pulling back toward the Moselle. We're going after them. And so the 4th Armored Division begins to prepare again, weary, reduced, but unbroken. They've turned back one of the most concentrated German counterattacks since Normandy. Now their task is to press the advantage before the enemy can recover. As the rain eases, the valley falls quiet once more. The fires are dying out, the smoke drifting eastward. Over the dark horizon, lightning flashes, faint, distant, like the warning of another storm to come. The Battle of Arracourt has ended, but the road ahead toward the German border will be longer, colder, and no less deadly. Dawn broke on September 21, 1944, though no one could see it. The fog over Lorraine had thickened again, so dense that even at 10 yards the hulks of Shermans vanished like ghosts. The world was gray, muffled, and trembling with the low thrum of engines somewhere out in the mist. Through that haze came the last, desperate blow of Hitler's plan, the German counterstroke. From the ridges east of Lezzy, the 111th Panzer Brigade formed up in silence. Over 70 Panther tanks, their turrets turning like predators scenting prey, began to crawl west toward the American lines. Behind them followed grenadiers packed into half-tracks, young men, most barely 20, clutching Panzerfausts. They believed they were about to crush a retreating enemy. Instead, they were driving straight into a trap. Inside one of the American command posts near Juvilliers, Colonel Bruce C. Clark studied the shifting dots on his operations map. Reports came through the crackling radio from forward observers, voices half-drowned in static. "Enemy armor moving through the valley, can't see a thing." "Sounds like Panthers, maybe 20 of them." Clark didn't hesitate. "Let them come in. Don't fire until they're in the open. Hit them as they cross the ridge." In the fog, the 37th Tank Battalion moved like phantoms. Shermans and M18 Hellcats, repositioned by dead reckoning, guided by compass and intuition rather than sight. Crews wiped condensation from their periscopes, straining for shapes that weren't there yet. At 0800 hours, the first Panthers appeared out of the whiteness, black crosses emerging from the gray. They were magnificent and terrifying, long guns, sloped armor, engines growling like thunder. The first shot came from Lieutenant Edwin Hedrick's Sherman, hidden behind a hedgerow. He waited until a Panther's flank filled his gun sight, then fired. The 75mm shell struck the thin side armor, a flash, a roar, and the Panther erupted into flame. The blast tore through the fog, and suddenly the entire valley came alive. Dozens of guns opened up at once. Muzzle flashes flared like lightning through the mist. The Germans, blinded and shocked, swung their turrets wildly, firing into nothing. Radio confusion spread among their ranks. Units collided. Panthers jammed into one another trying to turn. Clark's men moved fast, never staying in one place after firing. Shermans darted through hedgerows and low ditches, striking from unexpected angles. Tank destroyers on higher ground picked off targets by sound alone, their crews calling range and bearing by instinct. By mid-morning, 20 German tanks were burning, some still trying to reverse as ammunition cooked off inside. The fog carried the echoes of explosions like rolling thunder. A surviving Panther commander, Lieutenant Hans Mertens, later recalled, "We had no sense of direction. We thought the Americans were behind us, beside us everywhere. The fog was our enemy as much as theirs." By noon, the counterattack had stalled. Clark ordered his reserves to strike the flanks, turning the German push into a pocket. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion ambushed retreating Panthers near Richecourt-la-Petite, their 76mm guns punching through side armor one after another. When the fog briefly lifted in the afternoon, what lay before the Americans was astonishing. An entire Panzer brigade reduced to wreckage. Black smoke rose in thick pillars. Crews emerged from hatches, hands raised, dazed by the ferocity of the fight. The Germans had thrown their best and lost it in a single morning. Corporal James Collar of the 37th Tank Battalion watched one Panther burn itself out and said quietly, "They had the better tank. We just had the better day." As evening fell, silence returned to Lorraine. The valley that had roared all day now seemed impossibly still. Men stepped down from their tanks, coughing, shaking, touching the scorched armor of their machines. Somewhere to the east, the remnants of the 111th Panzer Brigade withdrew under cover of dusk. They would never again mount an offensive. The Battle of Arracourt was all but decided. By the morning of September 22nd, the mist that had shrouded the Moselle Plateau for days began to lift. The sun, pale and thin, bled through the haze, illuminating a battlefield littered with blackened steel. The silhouettes of burned-out Panthers stood like tombstones against the low hills near Les and Richecourt-le-Petit. The sound of distant gunfire had faded to occasional cracks, brief, isolated duels rather than coordinated engagements. Major Bruce Clark's Combat Command A had held its ground. After days of confusion, ambushes, and near-constant movement through the fog, the men of the 4th Armored Division finally realized the scale of what they had accomplished. When the fog lifted fully, reconnaissance crews counted over 80 destroyed German tanks and armored vehicles, many still smoldering where they had been hit by concealed Shermans or tank destroyers. In some places, the wrecks were so tightly packed that it looked as though an entire column had been erased in a single stroke. Sergeant Bill Leach from B Company, 8th Tank Battalion, remembered. When the sun came out, we saw them. Panthers everywhere. Some were still pointing our way. You could almost feel their crews inside, frozen at their posts. The smell was something you don't forget. The 111th Panzer Brigade, thrown into battle only days before, was effectively gone. Out of nearly 90 Panthers, less than a dozen made it back to German lines. The survivors limped east toward Chateau Salins, their morale shattered. For General Balck and his subordinates, the outcome was humiliating. They had expected the Panthers' firepower to sweep aside the weak American tanks. Instead, the terrain, fog, and flexible use tactics had turned that advantage inside out. The German plan to crush Patton as flank and open the road to Nancy had collapsed. The Americans, though victorious, were far from triumphant. Many of their Shermans were wrecked, their crews buried hastily beside them. The battlefield was quiet now, but the cost of holding Arracourt had been heavy. Tankers walked among the hulks, looking for familiar serial numbers, hoping to find friends alive, or at least to mark where they had fallen. Private Russell Cox of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion wrote in his journal that night, "It's strange. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and half-blind. But we didn't break. Maybe that's what wins battles like this, not armor or luck, but the way men keep going even when they shouldn't." In the days that followed, Combat Command A pushed east again, clearing the last German positions near Juvilliers and Lay. The weather turned colder. Fog returned, thicker than before. But the enemy no longer advanced. The men began to realize they had not merely survived a counterattack. They had broken the spearhead of one of Germany's last great armored efforts on the Western Front. For the U.S. Army, Arracourt became a textbook case in mobile defense. The use of speed, communication, and tactical improvisation to defeat a numerically superior force. Training manuals after the war would analyze it in detail. Yet for those who fought it, the lesson was simpler: never underestimate the power of a crew that knows its ground and trusts each other. As the 4th Armored Division resumed its advance toward the Saar, new units arrived to replace the fallen. The veterans of Arracourt stayed mostly silent about what they'd endured. When asked years later about how they'd beaten the Panthers, Colonel Bruce Clark simply said, "They fought by the book. We fought by the situation." When the guns finally fell silent over Lorraine, the Battle of Arracourt had lasted just over 10 days, from September 18th to September 29th, 1944. In that time, fewer than 250 American tanks and tank destroyers had faced down nearly twice as many German vehicles, most of them the formidable Panther AUSFG. Yet by the end, the U.S. 4th Armored Division stood victorious. Official tallies would later confirm the scale of the triumph: over 285 German armored vehicles destroyed, compared to just 25 Shermans lost beyond repair. The 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, both newly formed and poorly coordinated, had been annihilated. What the Wehrmacht had intended as a decisive blow against Patton's exposed flank had instead bled away its last offensive strength in the West. It was not just a tactical victory, it was a turning point in the war's perception of the Sherman tank. For months, Allied soldiers had cursed their machines, calling them Ronsons or Tommy Cookers, convinced they stood no chance against the heavy German panzers. Arracourt proved otherwise, that superior training, command flexibility, and quick thinking could overcome technical inferiority. At the center of it all was Colonel Bruce C. Clark, commander of Combat Command A, 4th Armored Division. His ability to coordinate dispersed units under poor visibility, to react instantly to enemy probes, and to exploit the terrain of Lorraine's ridgelines became legendary. Patton himself later wrote, "Clark's performance at Arracourt was one of the most outstanding examples of armored leadership I have ever seen." Historians would later describe the battle as the U.S. Army's finest hour in tank warfare, but for the men who fought it, the legacy was quieter and far more personal. In the small villages of Juvilliers, Les and Richecourt, farmers returned to find their fields strewn with twisted metal. Children stared at the hulks of Panthers, their gun barrels jutting toward the sky. In some places, locals built makeshift crosses beside burned-out tanks, marking the graves of crews, German and American alike, who never made it home. Veterans remembered the fog most of all. That eerie, shifting wall that had hidden both danger and salvation. It was said that at Arracourt a tank crew could drive within 50 yards of the enemy before seeing them. For many, that memory lingered for life. Lieutenant Charles Red Robertson of the 8th Tank Battalion later said in an interview, "You could hear them out there, engines, treads, clanking, but you couldn't see a damn thing. You'd fire at the sound and pray you got them first. It wasn't courage, not really. It was survival." When the 4th Armored Division moved east toward the Saar, their victory at Arracourt gave Patton's 3rd Army breathing room to continue its drive into Germany. It also signaled the beginning of the end for German armored might in the West. The Panzer brigades that Hitler had rushed into battle were decimated, their crews young, poorly trained, and sent into combat without proper reconnaissance or coordination. Arracourt showed, brutally and decisively, that the Wehrmacht could no longer replace its losses in men, in fuel, or in experience. For decades after the war, veterans of the battle gathered at reunions, often in quiet corners of VFW halls. They spoke little about the tactics or the numbers. What they remembered most were names: tank commanders who didn't make it back, crews who vanished into the fog, the sound of engines echoing across the French hills. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of the battle, French villagers near Lezy erected a modest granite monument. It bears no grand inscription, only the words, "To those who fought in the fog of Arracourt, September 1944. The field around it is peaceful now, covered in grass and wildflowers. But if you stand there on a misty morning, the land still holds echoes of engines idling in the fog, of shouted coordinates over radios, of men who could not see the enemy but fought on anyway." Arracourt remains one of the clearest examples of how the U.S. Army, still learning, still bleeding, mastered the art of armored warfare in Europe. A victory not of machines but of men who refused to be outmaneuvered, even when blind. When American tanks met the German Panthers, they met not in open plains or fair weather, but in the fog, where skill and willpower, not firepower, decided the outcome. And there, in the fields of Lorraine, the tide of the war's armored struggle quietly turned.